you all for tuning in. Today we have one of the tickets for the WSA presidential campaign, and we'll just be talking to them about their campaign and why they're running. So would you all like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, my name is Alexis Morris. I am the presidential part of the slate for WMU4US.
My name is Eric Effinger. I am the vice presidential candidate for the WMU4US campaign.
Okay. Thank you so much. So I guess the first question I have for you all today is, what do you think WMU's identity is?
Yeah, absolutely. I think WMU's identity is its students and its constituents, the people that make it up, and not necessarily what the administration or what we want to be as an institution from a financial standpoint. I think a lot of the times we pretend to be a university that we're not. We need to embrace our individuality and make it come together.
I think we also need to focus on where we're going as an institution, focusing on what our values are, and maybe the university needs to do some soul searching on what our values are so we can come out and say, this is what we believe in. We talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, but as I mentioned in the debate last night, it's not in our mission statement, it's not in our vision, and it's the fourth thing listed under our goals, under our 2020 strategic plan. So it's really time that we start figuring out what we are, where we're going, and what we value, and then actually acting on it. So that way what we say is backed up by our governing documents and mission statements.
Yeah, how are you all going to incorporate diversity and inclusion, really, specifying the inclusion part? How will you incorporate that into your term as president and vice president of WSA?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'll tackle it from the university standpoint, and I'll let Eric kind of talk about the WSA internal operations and how that would go down with our hopeful campaign if we would win. So to talk about diversity and inclusion, I think a lot of the times WSA recognizes that it has the most privilege at this university as terms of student organizations, and sometimes we don't utilize that privilege to the advantage of other marginalized groups on this campus. We've tarnished our relationship with some really important affinity organizations, APASA, LSA, BSU. It's really important that we reestablish those relationships and make sure that we can bring those seats to the table so that Eric and I know our identities. We know that we cannot necessarily be the voice of all students, so why don't we bring those voices to the table and make sure that they're heard?
As for the internal operations, Alexis and I, as we pledged yesterday at the presidential debate, will do our best to make sure that we can have an international student, at least one, on our cabinet. We recognize the fact that cabinet positions are through the application process, and if one doesn't apply, obviously we can't do that, but we really are trying to reach out and make sure our cabinet is diverse, not only based off of race or gender, but also background. Also, WSA, especially in our House of Representatives, we use Robert's Rules of Order. And that can be very daunting to somebody who's never actually come to a WSA meeting before. I remember, as I mentioned in the debate last night, my freshman year came to my first meeting as a representative for my RSO, and I didn't understand any of it. I was lucky I had some friends there to guide me through it.
Yeah.
So this past year, I believe we did one legislative session where we dedicated time to going through Robert's Rules of Orders. And yes, we did senator workshops too, but those are optional things. So at least having 2 Robert's Rules of Order debrief sessions at one at the beginning of each semester. That way anyone who turns over is acquainted with it at the start of the new semester. Also, putting out resources continuously year-long to make sure that anyone who does join the organization as a new ad can pick up on it like that. Alexis mentioned it took her 2.5 months to learn the language because she was never part of WSA previous to this year. And so really trying to cut that time frame down so our students that are involved are actually engaged and involved, and making it more accessible, more inclusive to everyone so everyone can speak and get their agendas and what they want accomplished.
Yeah, and I'm going to touch base a little bit on that. I think at the end of the day, we need to recognize that WSA right now has a big ego. We think we do the best at everything that there possibly is to do on this campus. I think we really need student leaders that understand that WSA is not the best at diversity and inclusion. WSA is not the best at allocation processes. WSA is not the best resource for the students, even though we have the opportunity to become that. So I think WSA has a lot of lessons to learn, and Eric and I have learned those lessons across our time at Western, but won't stop doing that work once we're in office.
Yeah, so, and kind of to your point about the Robert's Rules of Order, do you think certain operations within WSA kind of make you all disconnected from the students?
Yeah. Absolutely. So, anyone that's unfamiliar with WSA, right now we have a Senate and a House, and that has not always been the case. The Senate is composed of about 28 senators from academic colleges, areas around campus, senators at large that represent individualized issues, whereas our House is composed of, there's no limit for the House in terms of who's there, but we have registered student organizations, and so for students to go through the allocations process within WSA, you have to have a representative. So I think it's important that WSA leadership recognizes that the needs of the Senate and the needs of the House are very different, and right now we treat them very much the same.
And kind of going off of that too, it's really hard to work with people when you only know them from work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as we've mentioned before, we are people first, elected officials second.
Mm-hmm.
Getting to know everyone that we work with on a personalized, one-on-one basis, at least as best as we can, is what is important. Because if I can call a friend up that's in the House and say, hey, I have this idea, would you like to work on it with me? It's a lot better to be well received than to call someone up from the House and they go, wait, who are you and why are you talking to me?
Mm-hmm.
So, meeting at the flagpoles with students, making ourselves accessible by posting our office hours on Experience WMU, finding ways that we can have students interact with us outside of the legislative sessions and outside of cabinet meetings.
Yeah, and I would tackle a little bit of that issue too, is that last night in the debate we had, when the two slates were asked presidentially to identify the biggest issue that WSA faces right now, the other slate had mentioned the RSO collaborations, and I wanted to be made clear that Eric and I feel very much the same way. We've been having conversations with student organizations about, okay, what initiatives can we continue next year, but as well, what are some new things that we can bring on board? One thing that I'm most excited for if I win is to work with the future LSA president and bringing cultural awareness to Latino students on this campus. And so that's just one more way that we can include student voices that aren't currently represented within WSN.
Yeah, I think that kind of transitions into my next question for you all. It was mentioned last night that there's a real issue with connecting the different colleges and the different campuses that are under the umbrella of WMU. So can you guys specify what you will do to kind of prioritize connecting the different colleges, making sure across campus people are really collaborating and that people are aware of going on at whether it be this campus, the East Campus, or the Parkview campus?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a very valid question. I think that kind of stems back to our identity issue as a university. Right now we're very fractured. People are very proud to be a business Bronco. I can say the same, or engineering or aviation, etc. The list goes on and on. But at the end of the day, I don't think students recognize that they play a much bigger role within their academic study, and sometimes we feel confined to stick into RSOs or identities, communities, minors or majors, when really we should be embracing what good talents and other skills that you can get from other areas of campus. I know I personally had academic advisors say, oh, you don't want to go for that minor because it's outside of the business college. It starts there. It starts with students being receptive to faculty or advisors or other individuals that want to kind of push the envelope and what it means to be a unified campus.
Kind of going off of that as well, I remember in the 2019-2020 academic year, there was a campus improvements project that was brought forth where students from the College of Fine Arts would produce art and they put it on a gallery. And deans from the colleges could walk through, and if the students gave permission, the deans could basically write down the gallery piece and could bring it back to their college. Trying to find more ways to do that would be great, because I know it was passed, but I don't know if anything happened after that.
Mm-hmm.
So, one, seeing that through, finishing out on our legislative bills that we've passed before, making sure that those things come true, or at least doing our best to try to do that. But secondly, to try to find ways to physically remind our campuses and colleges that the others exist or intertwine. Now, Granted, that's going to be a little more difficult for other colleges. I can't exactly park an airplane on main campus.
If only.
If only, right? I'd love that, but I don't think anyone else would. But trying to find ways to maybe share pieces of our colleges with each other so that we are connected physically and through the actual process of working with one another.
Yeah, and I want to tackle that too. Is that something that WSA does have complete control over right now that I don't think that we do very well as an organization is utilizing the Legacy, which is our newsletter that we send out every month. We worked very hard to get there. But very rarely, I don't think if ever, we've had some senators that sit there and meet with their deans pretty regularly, write a piece on what their academic college is doing or what work that they've been working on with their deans or the concerns of those students. So how can we make sure that voices outside of WSA are being represented in our communications? Because truth of the matter is not every single student can be there Wednesday at 4:30 to come to our meetings.
Yeah, that's very true. One thing I'd like to touch on is about something that's been repeatedly brought up, this allegedly toxic culture within WSA. So would you guys like to touch on that and specify what you will do to change that in the future?
Do you want to start?
Sure. So, yes, there has been a toxic culture at WSA this year. We've seen, I believe Alexis mentioned in the debate last night, 4 or 5 resignations and turnovers in positions this year. And, we say that, resignations in itself aren't bad. However, finding out why they resigned and seeing a common trend among them, that's the problem. If people don't feel comfortable and don't feel like they're heard in WSA, that's a problem, especially since we're supposed to represent all of our students. And that's why we're running on the WMU For Us campaign. We're running for everyone. I've also heard numerous individuals throughout the year like, I was this close to resigning. And the only reason I didn't was because I knew someone that was in WSA that's a friend and, could rely on them when I needed it. And so recognizing that it's more than just the 4 or 5 resignations. It's including the people that could have resigned but chose not to.
Right.
And trying to address that situation. And if I become elected vice president, my main job would be to manage the internal operations of WSA. And that starts with building a new corporate culture. It starts at the top and works its way down. I mean, if you have an issue where you can't attend a meeting and you tell me last minute, like, hey, this came up, okay, I get it. We're students. Life happens. I'm not going to yell at you for that. That's ludicrous, And so to be more welcoming, to be more accepting, and to be more understanding, that's really what needs to happen for this toxic culture to go away.
Yeah, it was really disheartening for me as someone that sits on the cabinet alongside Eric and be talking to the current leadership and have them say that they were not concerned with the students that left our organization this year. Thankfully, Eric and I have both done a really good job of being able to talk to those individuals that left and understood why they left the organization, and have since received every single one of their endorsements who actually left the organization as well. And I think that speaks volumes to how people perceive and feel the real effects of a toxic climate and a toxic leadership style. Personally, I don't think I ever got really close to resigning, but I did see individuals that felt as though that was their only option and therefore acted on that. And then, I don't know, it's just really disappointing to see so much passion and so much, passion and love for the university and for WSA, to see it all go to the wayside because people weren't respected or their boundaries weren't respected.
I'd like to transition into one of the most popular questions of last night for the presidential debate that was not addressed. It had a great number of likes, but it was just a pretty simple one. Will you all denounce white supremacy?
Oh, absolutely. There's no other answer to that. 100% yes.
Yeah, of course. What happened just recently in the Gilmore Theater Complex is completely unacceptable.
Yeah.
Definitely, white supremacy is present on campus in some capacity and needs to be denounced.
How have you all demonstrated your passion for inclusion and incorporating that into WMU in your personal lives? Because I think we've seen, even beyond the Gilmore Theater Complex, with the fall court this year being all white, how have you all really examined that and really taken that on your own to incorporate into WMU's community.
Yeah, absolutely. So I, alongside Jacoby, who's a part of the other ticket, we're both homecoming and Bronco Badge homecoming interns this year. So it's hard not to recognize that we probably played a role in how that went down this year, and it was really disheartening to see that outcome. But it's also important to recognize that, one, neither of us were directly on top of that project, but two, what can the Office of Student Engagement do to make sure that we have more diverse voices in those and representation in those areas as well. So that extends to just beyond that certain situation. I personally had follow-up conversations with the director of Office of Student Engagement, associate directors of Office of Student Engagement, like what can we do better and fix that situation moving forward. But it also applies more to the WSA side of things, as Eric was saying. We can commit to having an international student on our board, but if they don't apply, then we still have the same issue. How can we make sure that that application is not only made accessible, but pushed in those areas? And I think that that ties back to our personal commitments and our personal beliefs that Western is a diverse student body, so how can their student government be representative of that? I personally I identify as lesbian, so I'm very active in those spaces and on campus as well as off campus. Over the past summer, I personally took part in the protests socially distanced, so I have a strong tie into and friends that are personally affected by these issues on this campus and off, and I think it's important that WSA and administration does their part in combating that.
For me, I'm going to go, I know you said try to go in personal lives, but I want to go to the spring 2021 prom. That's not part of my WSA responsibilities. That is an initiative I took.
Right.
Outside of that. In fact, I didn't even get to secure the funding through WSA without going through the process of securing funding. And I'm the Vice President for Finance and Business Relations.
Yeah.
But I worked with the Campus Activities Board, I worked with the Lee Honors College, I worked with numerous other organizations on campus to put this event together and make it free for students. Anyone who wanted to could submit an application to try to attend this event. There was no formal dress code. That was intentional. We didn't want to limit individuals based off of how much money they could spend on an outfit. We wanted to make sure that it was on campus in a safe environment where we can ensure that students would be, wearing masks, would be safe, and that everyone could have a fun time. And as I mentioned already, I'm going to hit this again, it was free. Because if there's one thing that we're all struggling with during the COVID-19 pandemic, it's finances. So this has really been my baby, I guess, over the past year. And I've worked with numerous individuals, numerous organizations from diverse backgrounds to try to pull this event together, and I'm so excited to see it happen on Saturday.
Thank you for that. What are 3 areas in which students will be able to see improvement in their on-campus life that you all will do if you are elected president and vice president?
Fantastic question. I'm going to do it like 1, 2, 3 because it ties it really closely to our 3 pillars of our campaign: accessibility, inclusivity, and sustainability. I'll start off with inclusivity because we feel like as though that is the most important one of any of the 3. They're not equally weighted. Inclusivity at the institutional level means that you have a seat at the table when you want a seat at the table. So when students come to WSA, it's no longer us going to say, okay, tell me your whole story and I'll go take it for you. I and Eric are both very committed to making sure that students are at those tables where those conversations are taking place and understanding how those decisions are made. So that is one very direct way of how students will be able to see it like a direct and tangible change.
It's interesting that a lot of our topics fit under multiple of these pillars. So, for example, the allocations process needs a little bit of revamping to help students, who want to be able to afford to put on an event. For example, I believe there was an association that did an outdoor cultural festival in a parking lot in fall. They went through the allocations funding process for. And I sat on that committee, and it was a really great to hear their desires, what they wanted to do, how they're going to bring awareness about their culture. But it's a very difficult process to get money to support these goals. And so revamping the allocations process to, 1, make it easier to understand for students, and also to be able to ensure that students who have an idea are supported through the process. Because if I was, submitting something for allocations, and I do all the work, I fill it out, I submit it, and I get hear back, that, hey, you missed something, we can't accept you this month, try again next month, I'd be really upset. And I'm not saying that that has happened, I'm just saying it can happen in our current process. So trying to set up, specifically between allocations and RSOs, a connection where they can work together to ensure that when the time comes for their presentation to be made to the allocations committee, everything is set, it's airtight, and we can move forward and ensure that those RSOs get the funding that they need.
Yeah. Just kind of piggybacking off of that, and I know you'd asked for 3, but I want to touch more on the second one because I think it's so important that right now our allocations processes may be the same 30 organizations coming to it each year asking for money. And how can we make sure that other organizations understand and recognize that this is possible for them? When I visited the Latino Student Alliance, I was the first one to break to them that CAB had allocations. And that's so crazy to me is that we have these resources and student leaders don't know how to use them. So an idea that I've had personally in the past few weeks and have been talking to students about is making like an RSO guide or like a handbook for like resources that students can utilize. It'll include WSA allocations, it'll include CAB allocations, it'll include how to write a transition binder. I'm also working on a piece of legislation within my own committee. I currently serve as the vice president for University Pride, and it's going to be buying audio equipment that students can use in outdoor spaces for free. And so what resources are other orgs providing? CAB has their own, WSA has their own. In the past, we've been sister organizations. Unfortunately, we haven't seen too much collaboration between our organizations this year, but recognizing, again, as I said before, WSA is not the best at everything, so how can we make sure that we can provide the most for our students through collaboration?
Yes, thank you so much for that. Is there anything else you all would like to touch on before we wrap up? Any closing statements?
No, absolutely. I think the most important thing is that you get out and go vote next week. Vote with your conscience and make sure that you're voting for the ticket that you believe has the best intentions for your university and for your student government.
Absolutely. Like I said in the debate last night, whether you're casting your vote at 8 a.m. on Monday or 4:59 p.m. on Friday, make sure to go out and vote with your conscience, and remember that Alexis and I are here for you regardless of whether we win or lose, but we do hope you do vote us into office as your next student body president and VP.
Yeah, and if there's any further questions, Eric and I are both accessible at WMU for us on Instagram. I run the Instagram account as an advertising student. It seemed very natural. So if you have any questions or comments, please let me know. I'd be more than welcome to have a conversation with you.
Well, yeah, thank you guys so much for coming in, and thank you all for tuning in. If you'd like to see more Western Herald video content, check out our website or our YouTube page and drop a follow on some of the links below. Thank you. Have a good one.